Got it there. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 1776 Syndicate. I'm Rod Kuntz, my co-host and co-founder, Jim Riley. Our guest tonight is Brian Freese, who recently ran in the primary for county commissioner in Flathead County. And Brian was a really strong candidate and a man of integrity and character. Jim and I both were impressed with what he'd done and want to keep him on our radar and also on everyone else's radar. But I've asked Brian to come on tonight and talk about the reasons he ran for commissioner and what kind of motivated him to do that, what he learned through that process, maybe what he would do differently, and the tips that he would give anyone who wants to run in the future, as well as hopefully some motivation to keep in the game. Which is it. A little bit about Brian. It's always hard for people to talk about themselves. And I realize this because I asked for bios from, and I know Jim does as well, from everybody that we have on as guests. And it's always hard to do that. It's easy to do the little stuff, but Brian was born and raised in the Flathead Valley, and he's been married he's been a business owner for 14 years, his wife, Melissa. He's got 4 beautiful and exceptional daughters. So he's 2 ahead of you, Jim. But I know you've got beautiful and exceptional daughters as well. He just has more of them, and that's always fun. He's been in the Middle East, Africa. He spent time in Korea and China with his wife. So Brian brings some unique characteristics to any campaign in that he's got a worldview, even though he was running for a local office. And worldview, especially in today's day and age, is very, very important. So I really appreciate that about Brian. And of course, he loves hunting, which is near and dear to my heart, foreign language and culture, which I also appreciate, an amateur botanist, wide variety of music. And I know you didn't put it on your bio, but I hope you'll talk a little bit too about your educational component, because I know you're a certified teacher, and there's a whole lot on the election agenda for just about everybody, local as well as national, with our school systems. So yeah. I know that that's part of what you've got going on there as well. And I like the way you finished your bio for us, Brian, and that is, he said you want your children to grow up in a land and people that are truly free, experiencing all that they were designed to become. And honestly, that resonates with our mission statement with the 1776 Syndicate. That's what we want. We want the next generation and the generations following to grow up in a land where freedom is known, embraced, liberty is respected, and people are truly free. So I'm really glad that was part of your bio, Brian, because that's part of why we've called you in tonight to just share your story. So without further ado, dive right in.
Sure. Well, I just want to say thanks to Rod and Jim for bringing me on here. I was kind of surprised, felt honored really that you'd call on me to speak a little bit, especially when I'm not in the winning side, at least in this election, because you feel that kind of feedback from people when you run and you win. It's like everyone's on your side. They want to hear from you, and if you don't win, you don't hear as much. But I think I appreciate the fact that you want to try to glean whatever I have, and I'll do my best to just deliver what I've learned in that short experience, and hopefully somebody who wants to run, who's new to it, can pick up a few tips along the way. So I guess to jump from where you just landed, I think that was one of the key reasons for me getting involved to that level was my kids, and just seeing everything that happened in our country and in the world, especially with the COVID response. It really ignited in me just a fire to see some things not happen again, or to happen differently, or to be involved on a level where I might be able to, affect good change. And a lot of it is just, living in an area, you want to see it blessed. And maybe you see other people that you want to see get into office that will help your county or your city be its best. And if you don't see that, then maybe you should step up and run. So, and that's kind of where I came to. I had a friend kind of just toss the idea out to me, hey, what do you think about running for commissioner? And I just sat on it and sat on it and sat on it. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, well, why not? Why not jump into this game? Of course, I had to talk about it with my wife and really digest that decision, because it was such an immense decision for us as a family, and running our business and everything, whether we could swing it. And I really truly have no regrets about it. But I'm going to come at it from maybe a little different angle in talking tonight, just because I want to share more of what I can share now that I'm not running, just to let you kind of in on the inner workings of my heart, because my life really has been a pursuit of Jesus. And I'm going to share, from a Christian worldview, because that's what I am. And if you're not, that's okay. I want to be upfront about that, because I think it will help you to understand, and also for people who aren't Christians who might be viewing this, to understand maybe how to connect well with the Christian community, because I think it's important. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But one of the key figures that really, really, really influenced me to get more involved in politics was Lance Wallnau. And maybe some of you have heard of him. His right-hand lady, Mercedes Sparks, she's going to be in the Flathead Valley actually this weekend for like a women's conference, which is kind of cool. My wife's going to go to it. I might step in for a meeting or two, but I think in pursuit of Jesus, I guess I imagined that life to look a certain way. And maybe I was taught it to look a certain way. And I guess I wouldn't have imagined him to lead me to the place that I did, but I can honestly say that I feel like he did. And maybe that's because I didn't have like a broad enough view, or I didn't have enough good teaching that helped me see the many facets of the way that I see the Lord working in the world. And the political mountain is part of that, and education is part of that. And it's not just merely a mission to like reach people who don't know Christ. That's a main point of it, but there's also this general idea that God cares about the world. He cares about nations. He cares about our nation. He cares about our community. Even the people that don't believe in him, he cares about them. And so I think that's really important to understand, even if you're not a Christian, because what our country needs, I don't personally believe that we can, that the country will be renewed or restored, or however you want to say it, whatever we need, that's the change that we need. I don't think that we'll get it without the Lord. And I don't believe that we'll get it without the church. And which is unfortunate, because I feel like there's a good part of the church that's not connected to the political realm. And I experienced that a lot in my campaign. And that's part of what I learned, is kind of the disappointment of maybe where Christians are at and where they're not at. And then it's not that I blame them, because I've been in their shoes before. I've kind of thought the same thoughts. I've been totally disengaged or disenchanted. But I want to offer maybe the viewers like a tip or two, and just some things that brought me to the point of like, okay, so you see a Christian, a good person, a good moral person, a hardworking person, but they're totally disengaged from the political realm. How can you encourage them to be involved? Because maybe they share your same values. Maybe they share values of freedom and liberty, and a wholesome community, and you want to encourage them, but they're totally disengaged from the political realm. And I don't know if viewers after this will be able to like look at links and stuff, but I wanted to share a link. Will they be able to see links?
Yeah, we can put them in the show notes as well, Brian.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna put this in the chat.
Perfect.
It's just it's just something I wrote about, and it's why I think Christians should believe for a Christian nation. And I mean, maybe that might be scary to people that aren't Christians, but it really shouldn't be. All it means is why Christians should believe for a wholesome society, why they should believe for a wholesome community, and why they should be involved in politics. And I think some of those ideas were things that I needed to even get involved. There were things that Lance Wallnau, and I'm sure other teachers are out there saying the same things, that kind of helped me jump from where I was to a place of like, hey, I want to get involved. And I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. You can stop me and interject and ask questions if you want to, Jim and Rod. But some of the things that I learned about, one is really just keep things an open hand, and not be disappointed too easily, and not be offended very easily. Like I knew, I was told, that there would be people I thought would be for me that wouldn't be for me, and people that I never expected to be for me that would be for me, so that would vote for me or support me or whatever. And so I just held that really open, and I just kept my heart soft and tried not to get really offended at people, because I never know why they're making the decisions that they are, or why why they would choose not to support me, and maybe in a different run they would support me. So I just kind of left a lot of things with an open hand. One of the other things that I was warned about, and not that I didn't take it seriously, I just didn't see it clearly, was that there really is an establishment. And we see that among, in the national level with the liberals, but I think I felt I kind of bumped up against the establishment among conservatives. And not that I was offended at that, but I just really experienced that some of them really weren't open to change, or even really willing to embrace newcomers very easily. And I kind of understand their thoughts a little bit on it, but by the same token, it was almost like I'm trying to express that, hey, we have really similar values, really shared values here. And some of them were really just not open to like embracing me into their camp. So I was warned about that there was like an establishment, and a little hard to break into. And I'm going to throw this out there, maybe not with a lot of explanation about it, but it's something that I realized during my campaign, because I think that we're fighting socialism in our country. We've been fighting it for quite a number of years. But I learned that socialism and materialism, that is scientific materialism, they're like one and the same coin. And I didn't really see it, because I've been involved in education for a while, but I didn't really see it until like kind of midway through my campaign. I realized it was like this aha moment where I realized like it's the same entity, the same spirit, if you will. So in terms of things I would do differently than what I did, I'm sure you could always say, well, you could push harder, you could spend more nights not sleeping, and like make more signs and knock on more doors. You could always do more of that, but honestly, I'm not sure I would do a whole lot different, given the time. I came in really late to the race. It was like the final filing days, to file, and so there's not a lot I would do differently. I might have purchased a cell phone that I designated just for my campaign. But there's certainly things I would do differently if I campaigned again. If I ran again, there are a lot of things that I would do differently. One of them is I would start a lot sooner. Like I would start pretty much as soon as, you can campaign or can start getting your name there. I would probably just watch the financial flow a little bit more and really try to spend down toward the end. I had supporters bringing in support like a few days before the election, and like it wasn't really that helpful to me. I had to return some money at the end, just because there wasn't really any purpose for it. But I would try to broaden my support base more than what it is. And I think I would spend less time trying to appeal to the conservative establishment, which is kind of sad to say, but I'm not trying to make enemies of them, but I just would probably focus more time on the broader voter base, and because I spent a lot of time like writing vetting letters and vetting questionnaires and stuff like that, that I look back, I'm like, yeah, that didn't really serve any purpose at all, other than the people in those groups kind of, knew a little bit more of my values, but they could have learned that just by going to my site too. So I'm not sure it really helped, other than kind of eat up a lot of my time. So so the other question you had about just going forward, like what is my posture? And I appreciate you, Rod, reaching out to me, this summer. And my summers with my business are packed full of our business, and I knew it would be that way. And I don't want you to feel like I'm disengaged, from, or I'm taking a break. I'm just trying to like focus my energies in the moment where it most counts. And there's like different ways to influence, running is one, supporting other candidates is one. I feel like I'm a bit of a bridge between the Christian community and the conservative political community, because I experienced where like I had pastors telling me when I'm out kind of campaigning in front of their church by the road, they're like, well, I think we need to be more neutral, like, and I had to explain to them, like, I don't think we have time to be neutral. I don't think we live in that world anymore. And then I would have people in the conservative camp, Republican conservatives, I'm not going to name names, but people who would come up to me and they would say, hey, you need to stop talking about God in your campaign. And I'm like, well, it's who I am. I mean, it's who I've been for decades. I'm not going to apologize about that. And I'm not going to stop bringing it up, partly because I believe that it's the key to real change in our culture, and ultimately in the political realm, is to be connected to him. So I feel like I'm trying to bridge these two worlds. And so I might be spending some time in the church trying to help people, like, hey, get out and vote, or these are good people to vote for, and then I might spend some time among conservative people saying, like, hey, don't write off the Christian community, because they're like a big voting block. And if you can connect with them, even if you're not a Christian, if you can connect with them, you can, gain a lot more influence than if you try to ostracize them or try to, blockade them. And I think that's a lesson that could be learned from conservatives who maybe don't hold to that worldview. And I try to connect, on all levels with people, because I care about all people, and I value all people, even those that don't share the same spiritual view that I do. So part of what I'm doing right now is I'm supporting candidates who are running in the general election. I had Pam Holmquist call me several times throughout the summer, asking for my endorsement, my public endorsement, write a letter to the editor. And, there are a couple other candidates that I did write a letter to the editor this week, so it probably will come out this week, of just a couple people that I feel like are important to get into office, just by the mere fact of what we're facing on a broader scope of, and it's not like I have a huge amount of sway, but I did have just over 3,000 people in the Valley that voted for me. So I feel like I can appeal to those people and say, hey, let's throw our weight in here and try to, support candidates that share our values. So yeah, that's kind of where it gives you kind of a broad scope of how I got into this arena, and what I've learned, what maybe I wouldn't do different, and where I'm headed. I'm focusing a lot on my family right now, because I believe that that's the key to where we're at in our culture right now, is to build strong families, build strong marriages, make sure that those values are implanted really well in the next generation. But I'm definitely not disengaging from the political realm. I just have to be mindful about what that looks like. So I don't know if you have any questions for me, like giving me any feedback, or you want to, dialogue a little bit. I should have opened up a little bit more during my discussion to allow you to interrupt, but
Oh no, I've got plenty, Brian.
okay.
And I'm sure maybe Jim, I'll let you go first, and then I'll back clean up.
Make sure you're unmuted there, Jim.
I was on mute. I was off mute, then I put it on. Anyways, I just want to thank you for your honesty and your integrity and your campaign position. And I'd like to slap around the person that told you to talk about God a little bit less, because in my opinion, our ability to talk about God more in what's happening in our society today is so important, and I feel like we lost the country when we stopped talking about our faith and our morals and what was important to us. So thank you for being steadfast on that and having a position on that. I think my comments are more supportive of what you said, but I want to highlight a couple things.
Sure.
Because it's of interest for those that will listen to this call and run for office or are in office. And the first is, you're a human and you raised your hand to do a job that most people won't do. And whether you get elected or not, you still put yourself out on the playing field. And I understand what you said, or what you meant by, when you don't make it, when you lose, right, that people quickly forget about you or lose sight of, what you represented and what you were willing to do. And you're just expected to pack your bag and go back home. And I think that's a good reminder that we should all be grateful and appreciative for anybody that's willing to raise their hand and get out on the playing field first and foremost. I know I have a pretty vast network now in the Valley, and of that network, maybe 1% is willing to get out on the playing field, so it takes a lot to do that. So thank you for bringing that up, because it's a nice reminder for the rest of us to not forget about those that have raised their hands, whether they succeeded or failed, to stay in touch, be appreciative, and utilize them as a resource or a go-to when needed for an opinion or a thought. So thank you for reminding us of all that. Second of all, I got into politics. For my case, it's on the school board for the same reason you did. And that was because of our kids and our willingness to be involved in their lives and bring value to the community. But also the COVID response as a nation was so unflattering and unforgivable at times, and un-American, and there's a whole list of uns that I could go through. And so I also appreciate you bringing that up, because on one point, I'm grateful that it occurred, because it woke up a lot of Americans, and you see a lot more people coming out to join in the fight, are in the effort to bring our country back to where it should be. But at the same time, I think it also brings forth an obligation of us to be willing to participate in our electoral process as candidates or supporters within that process, whatever that looks like for you. We all have different talents, right? So again, I'm supporting what you've said and how you said it in your reasoning, because I think more of us should take a role that you have and that I have and that Rod has, and so many of the people that listen to this call. I do like your perspective of being a Christian and bringing that view back to the process and the world and what you stand for. And as I said when I first started talking, is I think we need a lot more of that in this country, especially in our backyard. Where I really struggle, Brian, and maybe this is something that you can speak on for a moment, and this is a relevant topic. There's a struggle in the desire to have an elected position that has a salary attached to it, especially when we all have needs, more so now than ever with the recession that we're dealing with and the cost of living. But within that, there's also the moral obligation to follow through on what your belief system is and the reason why you're running for that office. And what I've seen in this last week is that, and I'll make an assumption on my point, that some of our elected officials are making decisions to become reelected because it's attached to a paycheck, and those decisions are against what their moral compass might be, or what their commitments are to their voters. And maybe you could just talk briefly how tough it was for you to maintain your moral position, even though you knew there might have been a salary attached to that at some point.
Yeah. I think anybody who gets into that arena, you can feel that temptation. You start to wonder, like, are people, am I going to lose favor, with people if I don't bend this way, if I let go, if I don't try to appeal to a broader base. I definitely used discretion in what I said in certain arenas, because I knew by divulging everything of my beliefs in that scenario might be misconstrued or whatever. But I guess I had to come to the point where running, how do I put this? The expectation of winning or having favor from anybody, any person, was not in the equation. That I was there for one purpose, and that was to please the Lord. And whether I won or I didn't win didn't matter. And that to me is what makes it easier to hold your principles, to hold your integrity, is if you're not, it's kind of like work. When you work for money, it's a trap, because you're just looking at the end goal of, like, well, I want the money. So you'll cut corners and do whatever it takes to, like, get the money at the end. But if you're working because you're trying to do an honest job, and you want to build a reputation of the work that the work that you do, the money will come at the end, but you're not sliding people. And I feel like that's how it is, like, with votes. Like, if you are working, because you have certain things that you want to see set in place in your community, you just work towards that, and you don't worry about the outcome at the end, because maybe it might not come now, maybe the payoff will be later, maybe the payoff will be different than you expect, because I still feel like I have influence, even if it's not in a position. And really, that's my end goal anyway, is, like, I want my community to be healthy. And if Pam Holmquist calls me up, and I get to share with her my concerns, about why I ran in the first place, like the gross overreach of the federal government during the COVID response, and that I care about election integrity, and I want to mitigate ballot trafficking and ballot harvesting, and I want to make sure that we ensure that there's in-person voting. Like, those are all things that I care about. Then I still have a realm of influence, and to me, that matters more than, well, I got elected, now I have a position that I can, get a paycheck or whatever. But you can definitely see how the political arena can change people when they get their sights off of what originally was their intent, their purpose, was to help create a good community. So I don't, I hope that answers your question. I think there are people that fall in that way, and I think that they need to have hope and grace to kind of be restored back to core principles and core integrity, because maybe they make bad decisions and they're like, oh shoot, like I just sacrificed my, what's important for votes, or maybe they took a back end deal or something. I don't know, but I'm sure it happens. But I think we need to reset somehow in the political arena, because we can't just let it all go to the dogs and say, well, all politicians are deceptive and all politicians are, are dishonest. But we've got to reset back to a place where we do care. And I heard the word statesman quite a bit in articles and different things, and I think that we need to get back to people who are statesmen and stateswomen. But that's my perspective from from where I'm coming.
Yeah, Brian, it did answer my question. I appreciate your perspective. In my opinion, we're at a point in a time where we're all required to make some sacrifices, not only for our freedoms, but for our faith in God. And sometimes those sacrifices might come in the form of lost votes, which might cost you a position. And, for people like myself, my sacrifice is time away from my family to be an elected official and do what's required of me there, and also to support around the country. So thank you for that. And maybe you're right. We do need some more statesmen, states ladies. So thank you for that. Rod, that's what I had. And I'm just so grateful to hear from Brian tonight and your willingness to give us the time. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to echo that too, of course, Brian, or we wouldn't have you on. I want to point out a couple of things that you brought up, and I'm going to emphasize these for the people watching in the future who may be contemplating running for office or for a board or something like that. The first thing is this: you said you have no regrets for running. And I think that's very telling. It's very important for people to understand that even if you don't win, if you have no regrets, it means you've learned something, you've left it on the table, and even now, there's good happening from you having run. We're having this conversation, and I'm going to talk more about one of the things you've said, because you had an aha moment, and it made it an aha moment for me just tonight. And it does change things. Those things can be pivotal, little moments. And then I'm going to jump backward in time too, because I think it's important that people understand you did not change. You are who you are. And your brand, I'm going to call it a brand. It's you. You are your own brand. And you can't be changing to other people's whims. And you haven't. And so jumping back in time, when I was sitting on city council, there was a time you came before the city council and you prayed for the entire city council. You used your 3 minutes of public comment and you stood up and you prayed for your representatives. And most of the people on that council, and there were some that are agnostic, and they were just kind of like dumbfounded. I don't think anyone's ever had the chutzpah to stand up, the intestinal fortitude to stand up and actually do a public prayer during public comment at a public government meeting.
Sure.
And that was incredible. And nobody said a word afterward, but I did. I spoke up and I said, well, if anybody is going to offer a blessing on us and what we do, I will gladly accept it.
Sure.
And and even then nobody else said anything, but it was an incredible moment, and I'll never forget it. And it was appreciated, and you were called to do that. You were led to do that, and you did it. And it took guts, and it takes guts to get involved. It takes guts to do the right thing. It takes guts to say the right thing. It takes guts to maintain your character under fire, under pressure. And you've done that. And so anybody running for office can see the example in what you've done. But I'm going to get back to some of that other stuff too. I can't let it go. What I'd do different. I'm going to jump down there because again, our goal here is to help anybody who wants to run. And I like what you said. You can always do more, but families first, right? So yes, you can always do more, but leveraging the people who are willing to help you and asking for that help is of utmost importance in running for any office, any campaign. You can't do it all yourself. And getting started earlier, boy, a great point, Brian. Anybody who's thinking about it needs to start now, which is kind of why we've got you on the show tonight, because we want you to start early now, right? For the next time. Okay. Just saying, more fundraising earlier.
Yeah.
When people get involved, I mean, running for any office takes support and name recognition, and that does take money. And nobody likes to ask for it, but you got to get out there and you got to give people the opportunity to be involved. And most people won't get involved at the level you are, and so they'll gladly write a check so they don't have to.
Sure.
You know, so it makes it easier when you understand that to ask for those donations. Say, look, I'm out there to be your representative, but I need your help. And I think it was Dr. Al, the first time I ever heard it, when people said, how can we help? And he said, I need your time, your treasure, or your talent. And just asking people that way, I need your time, your treasure, or your talent. And it makes it really easy to do that ask. So anyone listening in, that's a great tip. Just make sure you're asking for funds early, because it gets spent quickly. In inflationary times, we're going to need a lot more. Broadening your support base. You know, that was another thing you mentioned, and I think that's a great thing to have learned. I am going to take exception. I actually started this when you said you'd spend less time appealing to the conservative establishment.
Sure.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but at the same point in time, they need to hear the message.
Sure.
And that's how you start knocking. I know that, for example, John Fuller ran for office 3 times before he ever got elected. You got to start banging on the door. People have to know you're in it, that you're not just a one and done, that you are involved, you know, whether it's the next campaign season or something else. They need to see that you are in fact committed to the cause. And that's number one. And number two, even though you may think they've already got their mind made up or whatever, there are people you can win over at those things. And it is name recognition. They're going to be, your name will get out there. So-and-so spoke at a thing. I think it's a mistake for people to not take advantage of those free opportunities to get their message out in front of more people, because it's going to be written up in newspapers. It's going to be, you know, on the radio or the news. And so your name is out there. Just marketing, your name is being heard again. So I do understand your point. But for others out there, that's one of those sacrifices that I think you have to make. It doesn't mean that you're capitulating to the establishment. It means you're willing to stand up against them if you have to, but you're also asking for their support if they're willing. If they hear your message, you're always asking for change. And I think it's evident that change is more important now than it was even at the primary. And you're going to see that as we move forward.
Yeah.
That change needed to come, and I don't think it came quite the right way. So anyway, those venues, number one, it's the marketing, and number two, it's a learning opportunity. As you move forward, we need more statesmen and statesladies. And how you become that statesperson is standing up and being stately. You need that practice, being in front of those people and taking questions and that sort of thing. And that can only come with, you know, that venue. You know,
Right.
Those venues offer an incredible growth opportunity, and it helps build your confidence as a leader and as a representative. So I would just encourage you and anyone else to not forgo those opportunities. It would be easy to, and it's almost too easy not to. You know, not answering the surveys and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I understand, but at the same point in time, somebody might think, gosh, this guy's different, you know? And I always answered some of them, especially from liberal things, in very provocative ways.
Sure.
You know, they say, well, do you believe that we should have a $15 an hour minimum wage? And I said, no, I think we should have a $50 an hour minimum wage. You know, and it's like, wait a minute, because it sheds light on how ridiculous it is, you know.
Yeah, right.
But then they couldn't brand me as, oh yeah, he's one of those conservatives who, you know. So I don't know, have fun with it. I mean, that's the other thing is nobody's ever mentioned that campaigning can be fun.
Right.
You did at one point in time. You were enjoying
I
yourself.
did.
So
And I would say, I would still say the same thing. I would do it again, like it was a lot of fun for me. And I felt that joy, like coming into it before I even ran. I just told my wife, like, Melissa, I just think this would be fun just to like be in this arena, to meet these people, to give speeches, to try to step out. And it was. And I think that there are other people that would find that the same way too. And maybe I should clarify on my points about the establishment. I'm not trying to antagonize them because I think Jim's even part of the Republican Central Committee, but or his wife is, I can't remember, maybe both. I just mean, I definitely would still attend meetings. I definitely would still connect with them. I definitely would still go to debates, and you're right. I probably should still have put my values out there into their questionnaires and whatever. I think it was worthwhile to do that. And I agree with you on that point. There were just some areas where I felt like I was spending a little bit too much time, trying too hard to like win them over. And maybe just being myself and, letting them make that decision would have been more prudent. That's more how I want to put it. So
Brian, but my wife's on Central Committee as a captain, and now she's a director on Republican Women's.
Right.
But you don't have to quantify that because I agree with you. And I'm probably as much to blame as anybody else, and I'm fairly new to the groups and being involved in these things in Flathead. But we should be more welcoming for those people that are willing to be public servants, especially in the name of, our constitutional rights and our God.
Sure.
And there's no question of where you stood in those two pillars, right? So as fellow Christians and constitutional believers, we should have welcomed you with open arms, regardless of how many candidates. I think what happens though, and this is also a good learning lesson for all of us, is that, we have a tendency to like one another. And, so you've got one candidate that you like, and then another one shows up that you also like. Is like, oh, what do I do? Well, instead of doing something nice, we push away.
Yeah.
And I think we need to learn how to embrace that altogether, even the competitive forces, embrace that and go, hey, how do we find the best solution and the best person for the job or accomplish what we're all set out to do, even if that includes both parties running for the same office, So I'm glad that you brought it up. And I hope everybody, all 91 people that have been involved with the syndicate, watch this call, if for that reason alone, because we can be better people. And I'm glad that you pointed out. So please don't quantify it. I want to thank you for bringing it up. And, to be honest with you, as I was speaking, saying, my wife's a director on Republican Women, I'm going to bring this up to her and say, hey, look, as a committee, you guys should be super welcoming to anybody that's willing to raise their hand in the name of the Constitution and our God, regardless, right? Because that's where you should start with all things. You can go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
sure.
Thanks for that clarification too, Jim. And I agree 100%. But there is an establishment. You're not wrong. But I'm telling you that establishment is not permanent. That establishment does have room to change. And it got shook up even after this last primary cycle. So there's proof there. Something else I wanted to talk about real briefly, and I mentioned this even in our call last week, churches wanting to be neutral. Our government, our constitution was not set up for churches to be neutral. They were just there wasn't supposed to be a state, a federal religion, but that didn't mean churches were supposed to be neutral. And our pastors need to be re-educated.
Yeah.
All of our Christian clergy needs to be re-educated about what their rights are and what their duty as leaders of a flock is.
Yeah.
And I know Lance, because I do follow him. And I know that he's out there ringing that bell a little bit too. So I know that's possible. I don't know what just happened here. Excuse me just a second. Something went haywire.
You're good on our end.
All right, well, then I'll leave it. Something jumped up on my screen and I lost it. So if I'm good on your end, so there's just something there, and I don't know. I think that's part of my calling too, is to do more. And I may even have sent out to you the Black Robes
Yeah.
regiment. Yeah,
Right.
I mean that's part of it. But there's also how the 501c3 thing was kind of used to try and silence the church, and
Right.
that's been misinterpreted as well.
For sure.
And people need to understand their rights about promoting and supporting political speech from the pulpit without actually endorsing one candidate or another. We're missing the boat, is what I'm going to say about that. Now, back to the other thing that you said that was my aha moment.
Yeah.
And this isn't really about campaigning or anything else, although it is definitely something for all of us to have in the back of our minds. You said we know that we're fighting socialism. And even in my race, the race before this one for city council, one of the candidates was, and I don't know what he called himself, he ran as a democratic socialist. And he was endorsed by the former city councilman whose position I took. So that, who was just a Democrat, but he actually endorsed a democratic socialist.
Yeah.
And when you said that you realized that socialism and materialism were really one and the same thing, which doesn't really make sense when you think about it. Materialism, I think materialism, capitalism. But when I put materialism / entitlement, all of a sudden it ties it all together with socialism.
Yeah.
And you said it's an actual spirit. And I think you're right. That we're up against, this is a spiritual battle. And maybe even Putin got it right. He said that the US is basically dancing with the devil. He said, we're with our wokeism and transgenderism and all that stuff. He said, we're practicing Satanism as a nation. And he said that just last week. So, this is a spiritual battle, I think, as well. Whether you're Christian or not, the truth is the truth, no matter what the source. So I believe that we are in a battle, and we need to know who the enemy is, and we need to understand that. And again, that's part of where our clergy can come in to help educate their flock and get them to be active voters. So that being said, I just appreciate, again, Brian, the fact that you came back and you've given this some thought. I asked 3 what should be simple, easy questions, and they're not. They're all loaded. And you came back and you delivered. So I appreciate that very much. And I know that there's a lot of good that's going to come from this. And I just look forward to whatever door opens next. And I would encourage you to keep your foot in the door and your finger on the pulse and your keys on the typewriter and, your heart in prayer. And I know you do that anyway. So we look forward to seeing what's next for Mr. Brian Freese. And I thank you again. Anything else, Jim?
No, I'm just grateful. And Brian, if nothing else, during the process, we got to know you a little bit, me personally, because I did not know you before you ran for office. So I'm appreciative of that. And we're here for you. And echo what Rod said, keep your finger on the pulse and know what's going on, and look forward to seeing you around.
Yeah, you bet.
You want to talk about our guest next week, Jim?
I'm drawing a blank on who we've got scheduled next week.
Arthur Shopper.
Yeah, great.
Field director for Mass Resistance.
Yeah, we're talking about biblical principles here and where our faith lies. And really, Arthur has made it, taken it upon himself to be a voice for our children. Right now, he's really pushing back against this LGBTQ, this genital mutilation, right? And the courts allowing children to go through these operations as young adults. And he's got a very compelling story, a recent court case in California. It's actually wrapped John Fuller into it. And I just reached out to Arthur. I thought we would love to have you speak on our syndicate here so people can learn more about what's happening in our court systems and how tough it is as maybe the second parent of a child that wants to go through this operation. So anyways, I don't want to throw all the details out there. You're going to have to tune in because it's a really compelling story. So thanks, Rod. Look forward to seeing everybody soon. Brian, see you around town.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks very much. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining in.